out there, my name is Christina. Welcome back to my channel. This is the place that we gush about the films that we love and try understanding the ones that we don't. On today's agenda is the 2020 Romanian drama film entitled Uppercase Print. In 1981, chalk slogans written in uppercase print started appearing in public spaces in the Romanian city of Botoșani. They demanded freedom and elaborated on democratic developments taking place in surrounding areas. The author of these slogans, if you will, was Mugur Călinescu, a teenager whose case can be found in the files that were maintained by the Soviet secret police. His case inspired a play that was written by Gianina Cărbunariu, which in turn inspired Uppercase Print, as directed by Radu Jude.It and written by the duo. Now, in the absence of his inflammatory graffiti, Mugur would have likely still been sent to a facility designed for the re-educating of anti-communist citizens, owing to... We're getting kind of ahead of ourselves. From its establishment in 1948, a group founded with the name of the General Directorate for the Security of the People, or commonly known as the Securitate, defined the country of Romania as a mentally boundless state with disciplined ordinances. Affectionately dubbed the Secret Police, they were officially tasked with guaranteeing the safety of remaining citizens from what was perceived by those in power as external and internal enemies, and thus created an atmosphere of fear amongst those who might be targeted as suspected culprits or traitors at risk of being subjected to deportation and re-education tactics. It is estimated that the collective actions of the Securitate costed approximately 200,000 people their lives until its dissolution in 1990. Employing well over 40,000 members officially and dependent on over 500,000 of Romania's citizens that reported to them unofficially, the Securitate and their included squandering of anti-communist rhetoric that was often swift perpetuated a feeling of control that was largely impregnable and made Călinescu's elusiveness as a transgressor largely unprecedented. Bearing this in mind, Uppercase Print's pace is based in an otherwise usual blend of surveillance, paranoia, and urgency, further embracing the artificial atmosphere of a stage play to embellish the amount of self-awareness required of Romanians in their daily lives during Nicolae Ceaușescu's reign as president, and increased risk of their most seemingly private conversations being their own undoing. Like I was getting to, in the absence of his inflammatory graffiti, Mugur would have likely still been sent to a facility designed for the re-educating of anti-communist citizens, owing to his allegiance in listening to Radio Free Europe, RFE. Founded as anti-communist propaganda in 1949, Uppercase Print obviously doesn't have the time to elaborate on techniques used to suppress access to its messages, much less those used specifically by Ceaușescu that provide a backdrop for how Mugur was treated when he was arrested and while he was being processed. While it was extremely common for communist leaders to coordinate the infiltration of RFE headquarters, Ceaușescu's attempts were unprecedented in terms of violence and carried out under the codename Ether from the 1970s until his time in office was over. Other operations included the physical attack of Romanian journalists suspected to or known to work for RFE, which led to the death of at least 3 known directors, and the bombing of its headquarters in Munich, Germany on February the 21st, 1981. That in mind, Uppercase Print's dialogue is reflective of at least 2 things integral to both the investigation it is dramatizing and Nicolae's disdain for the RFE, a redistribution of responsibility for Mugur's actions in terms of his influences, and pathological maintenance of the status quo. Almost all of the exchanges carried out on screen can be extrapolated as concerted efforts to be blameless in a knowingly merciless context, resulting in a tainted narrative that has no room for spotless hands, especially so when juxtaposed with archival footage designed to be contrary to the RFE's objectives or messages. Through aggressive reactions to otherwise innocuous cases of disobedience, an example, someone honking a horn in an area they are not supposed to, viewers are made all the more privy to the smokescreen of contentment Nicolae was desperate to keep unblemished. There may be ludicrousy in a single teenager being treated like an enemy of the state. However, Ceaușescu's own history points to an understanding of the potential youth have when it comes to espionage and becoming vessels of long-standing change. Born in 1918, he was introduced to the ideology of communism for the first time while doing an apprenticeship as a shoemaker, with his master, literary critic Alexandru Ceaușescu, being an active member of the then illegal Romanian Communist Party, PCR. Having joined the PCR in 1932, Ceaușescu's youth parallels rather accordingly with the primary subject of Uppercase Print. He was arrested in 1933 for reasons that remain unknown, and then again in August 1934 for the distribution of anti-government leaflets. Having gained a reputation as a dangerous communist agitator, Nicolae eventually spent 2 years in prison from the year 1936 for his continuous involvement in anti-fascist activities. In 1947, Romania was seized by communist power, and this was eclipsed in part by Nicolae's appointment as a leading member of the Romanian Union of Communist Youth, the UTC, from 1944 to 1945. By the time Călinescu was born, Nicolae was established as a well-known political figure in Romania, and this was due in part to industrial-related policies that contributed to a period of prosperity in Romania that were subsequently attributed to his communist ideology. In 1966, Ceaușescu began putting policies in place to increase the number of individuals living in Romania, concurrently pursuing the goal of increasing the number of members enrolled in the UTC. By the 1980s, the UTC was considered one of the most powerful mass organizations in the country, with membership by the 10th grade being mostly compulsory. So, to call Uppercase Print an enthusiastic flight of rebellion would be to make a mockery of its main character. With the exception of the time he spent trying to avoid being caught, Călinescu did nothing to hide his actions. He confessed shortly after being apprehended and didn't name anyone as a potential co-conspirator, his benevolent and almost arrogant resistance to rehabilitation techniques being captured by Lazarevich's performance. As referenced to correctly, Călinescu was not rewarded for his honesty. He was subjected to unethical interrogation techniques, though they were far more extreme than the forced consumption of caffeinated beverages during the investigative process that left him with debilitating headaches. Made to sit in front of a blinding light while being questioned, it is suspected that the leukemia that took Călinescu's life on February 14, 1985, when he was only 19 years old, was a side effect of radioactive exposure. A clear-cut example of an inability to challenge Ceaușescu's regime without appreciable repercussions. Furthermore, concerns Mugu's loved ones had regarding his record, or that of anyone that might be insinuated as a collaborator, as generated by the Securitate, would be substantiated by the fact that access to them would not be allowed until 1999, in spite of the fact that this organization was dissolved in 1990, increasing the likelihood that our understanding of how people like Mugu were treated as punishment are really surface level at best. Is it possible to bring attention to Călinescu's actions without being cursory? Probably not. But fortunately, Uppercase Print does maintain a certain dignity about its main character. Correspondence from the time states unfairly and nonchalantly that Mugu acted without fear, and this dismisses the amount of which he was motivated to improve the conditions for his fellow citizens, with special consideration for the hardships suffered by his own mother. There's quite simply no way he carried along protesting by way of chalk lines without fright, and in spite of this, he strategically made himself a liability for people that had ideological but strictly private similarities. And just for the record, on December 25, 1989, Nicolae Ceaușescu was arrested and executed, one of many events marking the end of communist rule in Romania. Officially convicted of genocide and economic sabotage, his death does point to a cognizance as to how little he cared about the well-being of the people he presided over, which would include some of the people involved in the making of Uppercase Print. There's no telling how Mugur would have felt about this conclusion. Would he have gloated with pride, or would he have simply felt vindicated? Whatever the case, he likely would not have called this a personal victory, making his story something broadly applicable, particularly for those that might feel powerless or incapable of inspiring a revolution. In light of Mugur's suffering and Romania's current status as a democracy, most of us have perspectives involving censorship and free speech that are more often than not skewed in our favors. Mugur was a courageous, hard-working, and principled little boy in a world determined to crush his spirits. And while he didn't get the last laugh, he certainly earned it. If you are still watching, thank you so much for your time. As usual, questions and comments are encouraged and welcome below, in addition to suggestions as to what movies I should be watching and analyzing next. I'll see you next time. My name's Christina. Happy film hunting. Bye.